The woman's hand trembled as she pressed the child's face against her chest, willing him to stay silent, while the men on horseback thundered past the abandoned grain mill where they hid. Olivia Nash had been running for 3 weeks now, and every shadow felt like death reaching for them both. The little boy, barely 4 years old, whimpered softly against the dusty fabric of her dress, and she hummed low in her throat, the way his mother used to before fever took her in that cramped St. Louis tenement. It was September 1876, and Downeyville, California, had seemed like salvation when Olivia first glimpsed it from the stage-coach window 3 days ago. The gold rush town had seen better decades, but it still clung to life in the Sierra Nevada mountains, populated by stubborn miners, hopeful merchants, and people like her who needed to disappear. The problem was that Thomas Garrett had men everywhere, and his reach stretched farther than she'd ever imagined possible. "Is he gone?" little Samuel whispered, his blue eyes wide with the kind of fear no child should know. "Hush now," Olivia breathed, listening to the hoofbeats fade down the dirt street. "Just a bit longer." She'd promised Samuel's mother, her dearest friend Margaret, that she'd keep the boy safe. Margaret had died clutching Olivia's hand, blood seeping through the bandages wrapped around her middle, begging her to take Samuel far away from his father. Thomas Garrett was a powerful man in Missouri, a railroad magnate with political connections and a reputation for getting what he wanted. What he wanted now was his son, not out of love, but out of pride and possession. Margaret had stolen the boy away in the night after witnessing Thomas strike Samuel hard enough to leave bruises that lasted weeks. She'd made it 2 months before the consumption took her, and with her dying breath, she'd made Olivia swear to never let Thomas have the child. The mill was quiet now except for the settling of old wood and the scurry of mice in the walls. Olivia gathered her courage and peered through a crack in the boards. The street outside looked empty in the late afternoon sun, just packed dirt and wooden storefronts, and the saloon with its painted sign swinging gently in the mountain breeze. "Come on, sweetheart," she whispered to Samuel, taking his small hand. "We need to find somewhere safer before dark." They slipped out the back of the mill, keeping to the shadows between buildings. Olivia had exactly $12 to her name, and the room she'd rented at the boarding house was no longer safe. Not after this morning when she'd spotted one of Garrett's men talking to the stage driver. The man had shown a photograph, asked questions, offered money for information. It was only a matter of time. She needed help, but trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. Everyone had a price, and Thomas Garrett had deep pockets. Still, they couldn't survive on the run forever. Samuel needed food, shelter, stability. He needed to be a child instead of a frightened rabbit. The stable at the edge of town seemed quiet. Olivia had noticed it on her first day, a well-maintained building with horses in the corral and a sign that advertised boarding and breaking services. She'd also noticed the man who ran it, a tall figure who moved with easy confidence and spoke softly to the animals in his care. He'd tipped his hat to her once when she'd walked past, and she'd seen kindness in his weathered face. Desperation made people foolish, she knew, but she was out of options. The stable doors stood open to catch the breeze. Inside, the smell of hay and horses wrapped around them, and Olivia heard someone whistling a tune she didn't recognize. She cleared her throat. The whistling stopped, and a man emerged from one of the stalls, brushing dust from his hands. He was probably in his late 20s, with sun-darkened skin and dark hair that needed cutting. His eyes were hazel, sharp and observant, and he wore work clothes that had seen plenty of use. He looked at Olivia, then at Samuel, and something in his expression softened. "Help you, madam?" His voice was rough but gentle, like wind through pine trees. "I hope so," Olivia said, and hated how her voice shook. "I need somewhere to stay, just for tonight. I can work, I can clean or cook or whatever you need, but I can't pay much and I can't go back to the boarding house." The man studied her for a long moment. His gaze took in her travel-stained dress, the protective way she held Samuel's hand, the fear she couldn't quite hide. "You running from something?" "Someone," she admitted, because lies would only make things worse. "And it's not what you might think. I'm not his wife or anything like that. The boy, his name is Samuel. His mother was my friend. She died and asked me to keep him safe from his father. The father is a bad man, a dangerous man, and he has people looking for us." She watched the cowboy's face for signs of judgment or suspicion, but saw only consideration. He glanced at Samuel, who pressed closer to Olivia's skirts. "What's the father's name?" "Thomas Garrett. He's from Missouri, has money and influence. One of his men was in town this morning asking questions." The cowboy nodded slowly. "I heard about a fellow showing around a photograph. Said he was looking for a woman who'd kidnapped his employer's son." He paused. "That your side of the story?" "Samuel's mother took him because his father was hurting him. She was dying and made me promise to protect him. I know how it looks, and I know you have no reason to believe me, but I'm telling the truth." Olivia felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back fiercely. "If you want us to go, we'll go, but please don't tell anyone you saw us." The cowboy pushed his hat back on his head and sighed. "Name's Zachary Wells. This is my place, inherited it from my uncle 2 years back. I've got a room in the loft that's not much, but it's dry and warm." "You're welcome to it, both of you." Olivia stared at him, hardly daring to believe. Just like that, just like that. Zachary looked down at Samuel and crouched to the boy's level. "You hungry, son?" Samuel nodded, still wary. "Well, I've got some bread and cheese up in that loft, and I think there might be some apple preserves too." "How does that sound?" "Good, sir," Samuel whispered. Zachary stood and met Olivia's eyes. His gaze was steady and sure. "I don't know what kind of man would hurt a child, but I know I don't want to help him find one. Your secrets are safe with me. So, are you both?" Something in Olivia's chest loosened, a knot of tension she'd been carrying for weeks. "Thank you. I'm Olivia Nash, and I promise we won't be any trouble." "Trouble's relative," Zachary said with a slight smile. "Come on, let me show you where you'll sleep." The loft was reached by a sturdy ladder at the back of the stable. It was a single room with sloped ceilings and a window that looked out over the mountains. There was a bed, a washstand, a table and 2 chairs, and a trunk in the corner. Simple but clean. "I usually sleep down in the office," Zachary explained, setting a lantern on the table. "Easier to hear if any of the horses get restless at night." "This was my uncle's space, but he's been gone a while now. You make yourselves at home." He brought them food as promised, along with fresh water and blankets that smelled of lavender. Samuel ate hungrily, getting crumbs everywhere, and Olivia felt her own stomach unclench enough to manage a few bites. It was the first time in days she'd felt even marginally safe. Zachary lingered by the ladder, clearly wanting to say something. Finally, he cleared his throat. "Garrett's man, he's staying at the hotel. Asked me some questions this afternoon, but I told him I hadn't seen anyone matching your description. He's offering a reward, significant money." Olivia's brief sense of security evaporated. "How much?" $500. It was a fortune, more than most people in Downeyville would see in a year. Olivia looked at Zachary, searching his face for signs of greed or calculation, but found none. "That's a lot of money," she said quietly. "It is," he agreed, "but some things matter more than money." "Get some rest, Miss Nash. We'll figure things out in the morning." After he left, Olivia helped Samuel wash his face and hands, then tucked him into the bed. The boy was asleep almost instantly, exhausted from weeks of fear and flight. She sat beside him, stroking his fine blonde hair, and let herself cry silently in the gathering darkness. She'd been 23 years old when Margaret died, and in the space of a single night, she'd become responsible for another human life. The weight of it terrified her. She'd worked as a seamstress in St. Louis, lived in a respectable boarding house, attended church on Sundays. Her life had been small but safe. Now she was a fugitive, protecting a child from his own father, trusting a stranger because she had no other choice. But something about Zachary Wells made her want to trust him. She'd seen cruelty in men, seen selfishness and greed and violence. She'd seen it in Thomas Garrett's cold eyes when he'd come to the boarding house looking for Margaret and Samuel, his voice pleasant but his words laced with threat. Zachary was different. The gentleness in his hands when he'd touched Samuel's shoulder, the quiet certainty in his voice when he'd promised safety, it all spoke of a different kind of man. Olivia wiped her eyes and moved to the window. Below, she could see Zachary in the corral with one of the horses, a young chestnut that seemed skittish. He moved slowly, speaking words she couldn't hear, his posture relaxed and patient. The horse eventually approached, snuffling at his outstretched hand, and Zachary stroked its neck with obvious affection. She thought about Margaret, about the promise she'd made. She thought about Samuel, about the life he deserved, free from fear and pain. And she thought about the long road ahead, because even if they were safe for tonight, tomorrow would bring new dangers. But for now, in this moment, they were warm and fed and protected. It would have to be enough. Morning came with the sound of roosters and the whinny of horses eager for their breakfast. Samuel stirred beside Olivia, blinking in the early light that streamed through the window. She'd barely slept, too afraid to let her guard down completely, but the boy looked rested and less frightened than he had in weeks. "Where are we?" he asked, rubbing his eyes. "Somewhere safe," Olivia told him, hoping it was true. "Come on, let's get you dressed." They climbed down the ladder to find Zachary already hard at work, mucking out stalls and distributing hay. He looked up when they appeared and nodded a greeting. "There's a pump out back if you want to wash up," he said. "And I've got coffee brewing in the office." The office was a small room off the main stable, cluttered with tack and ledgers and the general debris of a working man's life. A pot of coffee sat on a small stove, and beside it, Zachary had laid out more bread, some butter, and a jar of honey. "You didn't have to feed us," Olivia said, though she was grateful. "Can't have you starving under my roof," Zachary replied. He poured coffee into 2 tin cups and handed her one. "I've been thinking about your situation." Olivia's stomach tightened. "And Garrett's man is asking around town, but so far nobody seems to know anything. Downeyville's a small place, though. If you stay here too long, someone's bound to notice. The question is whether we try to hide you or get you somewhere safer." "Where would be safer?" Olivia asked. "He's got resources, connections. He found us in Denver, found us in Salt Lake. I thought California would be far enough, but here we are." Zachary sipped his coffee, considering. There are places in these mountains where a person could disappear if they wanted to. Mining camps, small settlements, places that don't ask many questions. Or there's the coast, if you wanted to try for a ship to somewhere else entirely. "I don't have money for passage," Olivia said. "I barely have enough to keep us fed for another week." "Then we focus on keeping you hidden until Garrett gives up looking." "Will he give up?" Samuel asked quietly, and both adults turned to look at him. The boy's face was solemn, older than his years. "My father doesn't give up. Mama said he always gets what he wants." Zachary crouched down beside Samuel's chair. "Well, your mama was a brave woman for getting you away from him, and Miss Olivia is brave for keeping you safe. Sometimes people do give up, especially when they realize they're not going to win. "Do you really think so?" Samuel asked. "I do," Zachary said firmly. "And in the meantime, you've got me helping too. Nobody's going to hurt you here, understand?" Samuel nodded, and some of the tension left his small shoulders. Olivia felt something warm bloom in her chest, watching this cowboy be so gentle with a frightened child. They spent the morning carefully. Olivia helped where she could, sweeping the stable and organizing tack, while Samuel stayed close by, watching everything with curious eyes. Zachary showed the boy how to brush one of the gentler horses, an old mare named Daisy who tolerated Samuel's enthusiastic but clumsy efforts with patient grace. Around midday, a customer came by, a grizzled prospector wanting to board his mule while he went into town for supplies. Zachary dealt with him quickly, and Olivia kept Samuel in the loft until the man left. It was a reminder of how precarious their situation was, how careful they needed to be. That afternoon, while Samuel napped upstairs, Olivia and Zachary sat in the office, speaking in low voices. "Tell me about Garrett," Zachary said. "The more I know, the better I can help." Olivia wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, gathering her thoughts. "Thomas Garrett owns railroad stock, has interests in mining and shipping. He's in his 40s, well-connected politically. His wife died in childbirth with Samuel, and for the first few years he mostly ignored the boy. Margaret was Samuel's nursemaid, but she was more like his real mother. As Samuel got older, Thomas started paying more attention, but not in a kind way. He wanted the boy to be tough, to not cry or show weakness. When Samuel couldn't meet his expectations, Thomas would punish him. What kind of punishment? At first just harsh words and isolation, but it got worse. Margaret told me Thomas struck Samuel across the face for spilling his dinner. Another time he locked the boy in a cellar overnight for being afraid of the dark. Margaret tried to intervene, but Thomas told her she was making Samuel weak. That's when she started planning to leave. Zachary's jaw tightened. And Garrett wants him back because pride, I think, and control. Thomas Garrett doesn't like losing anything he considers his property, and that includes his son. He doesn't love Samuel, not really, but the boy carries his name. To let a servant steal his child away would be humiliation he can't abide. So he'll keep looking. Until he finds us or decides the cost is too high, Olivia said. I don't know which will come first. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the situation settling between them. Finally, Zachary spoke, his voice thoughtful. My uncle used to say that sometimes the best place to hide is in plain sight. If we try to sneak you away in the night, people will wonder. But if you're just a woman who's staying here, working in exchange for room and board, that's normal enough. This is a rough town, lots of people passing through. Nobody looks too hard at anybody else's business. But Garrett's man has a photograph of me, Olivia pointed out. True, but photographs don't always look much like real people, and you could change your appearance some. Cut your hair, wear different clothes. I've got some of my aunt's things in that trunk upstairs. She was about your size. Olivia touched her long brown hair, which she'd always worn pinned up in a simple style. The thought of cutting it felt strange, but vanity seemed foolish when weighed against Samuel's safety. Would it really help? Might, and it would buy us time to figure out a better plan. Zachary met her eyes. I meant what I said last night. You're safe here, both of you. I'm not going to let anything happen to you. The certainty in his voice made Olivia's throat tight. Why are you helping us? You don't know me anything. Zachary looked away, and when he spoke, his voice was quieter. My sister had a husband who used to beat her. Started about 6 months after they married. She tried to hide it, wore long sleeves even in summer, always had some excuse for the bruises. I didn't figure it out until it was almost too late. When I did, I helped her leave. got her on a train to San Francisco where she had friends. Her husband came looking, threatened me, tried to get the law involved. But she got away, made a new life. Last letter I got, she was happy, safe, working in a dress shop and courting a banker who treats her like she hung the moon. He turned back to Olivia, and she saw old pain in his eyes, but also determination. I know what it's like to help someone run from a bad situation, and I know that sometimes good people need a hand up. You're trying to protect a child from his own father. That takes courage, and I respect it. So yeah, I'm helping you, and I'll keep helping you for as long as you need. Olivia felt tears threaten again and blinked them back. Thank you. I don't know how I'll ever repay you. Don't worry about repayment. Just focus on keeping that little boy safe and happy. That's enough. Over the next few days, they fell into a routine. Olivia did cut her hair, awkwardly at first until Zachary helped her even it out, leaving it short enough to curl around her ears. She dressed in simple work clothes, trousers and shirts that had belonged to Zachary's aunt, who'd apparently been a practical woman. The change was startling when she looked in the small mirror. She barely recognized herself, which was precisely the point. Samuel began to relax, drawn to Zachary's patient presence and the gentle routine of stable work. The boy learned to measure out feed, to fill water troughs, to speak softly to nervous horses. Zachary taught him carefully, praising small successes and never showing frustration when Samuel made mistakes. Olivia found herself watching Zachary more than she probably should. The way he moved, economical and sure. The way he spoke to the animals with genuine affection. The way he'd glance at Samuel to make sure the boy was all right, or catch her eye across the stable and offer a small smile that made her stomach flutter. She hadn't expected to feel anything like attraction. Her life was too complicated, too dangerous, and Zachary was just being kind. But kindness was a powerful thing, especially when you'd seen so little of it. And beyond the kindness, there was something solid about Zachary Wells, something trustworthy and good that made her want to stay close to him. On the 5th day, Garrett's man came to the stable. Olivia was in the loft with Samuel when she heard an unfamiliar voice below. She peered through a gap in the floorboards and felt ice run through her veins. The man was tall and lean, dressed in a city suit that looked out of place in the dusty stable. She'd seen him before in St. Louis, one of Garrett's hired men. Looking to board a horse, Zachary was saying, his voice casual. No, looking for information, the man replied. His accent marked him as educated, Eastern. I'm searching for a woman and a young boy. The woman kidnapped the child from his father, my employer. We have reason to believe they may have come through Downeyville. Zachary made a thoughtful sound. Well, lots of people come through Downeyville. What's she look like? The man pulled out a photograph and showed it to Zachary. From her position, Olivia couldn't see Zachary's face, but she heard him say, pretty woman. Can't say I've seen her, though. But like I said, lots of people pass through. She would have had a small boy with her. Blonde, about 4 years old. They might be trying to hide, might have changed their appearance. Trying to hide from the boy's father, you said. Zachary's tone was neutral. That seems odd. Why would a woman steal a child? She's deranged, the man said smoothly. The boy's mother died, and this woman was a friend of hers. Became obsessed with the child, convinced herself that the father was unfit. She took the boy in the night. The father is frantic with worry. That's a terrible thing, Zachary said. If I see anyone matching that description, I'll be sure to let you know. You staying in town? At the hotel. The name's Carlson. There's a reward for information leading to the child's recovery, $500. That's generous. Mr. Garrett is a generous man when it comes to his son's welfare. After Carlson left, Olivia stayed frozen in the loft, her heart hammering. Samuel was pressed against her side, silent and trembling. They waited until they heard Zachary's footsteps on the ladder. His face was grim when he appeared. "You heard all of it," Olivia said. "Did he believe you?" "I think so, but he's going to be watching, asking more questions around town." Zachary sat down heavily on one of the chairs. "We need to be more careful. No letting Samuel outside during the day, not until Carlson leaves town." "How long will he stay?" "Hard to say. Could be days, could be weeks. Depends on how determined Garrett is." Samuel spoke up, his voice small. "I don't want to go back. Father will be angry." Zachary reached over and ruffled the boy's hair. "You're not going back, son. I promised you're safe here, and I keep my promises." That night, after Samuel was asleep, Olivia and Zachary sat in the office together. It had become their habit, these quiet evening conversations while the town settled into darkness around them. They talked about small things mostly, safe topics that didn't touch on the danger lurking outside. Tonight, though, the presence of Carlson in town made everything feel more urgent. "Tell me about your life before all this," Zachary said. "What was it like?" Olivia thought back to St. Louis, to the neat boarding house room and the steady work and the simple pleasures of her days. "Quiet," she said. "I was a seamstress, did alterations and mending mostly. Margaret and I became friends when she brought some of Samuel's clothes in for repair. She was lonely, I think. Garrett's house was cold and she had no family of her own. We'd have tea together on her afternoons off, and she'd bring Samuel. He was such a sweet child, always curious and gentle. I loved them both. She was lucky to have you as a friend. I was lucky to have her. When she got sick, I visited as often as I could. The doctors said it was consumption, that there was nothing to be done. Garrett wouldn't pay for a hospital, said it was a waste of money on a servant. She died in a cramped room in the servants' quarters, and I was the only one holding her hand at the end." Olivia's voice broke slightly. "She made me swear to take Samuel, to run as far as I could. She said Garrett would destroy him if I didn't. So I took the boy in the night, took what little money I'd saved, and we ran." Zachary was quiet for a moment. "That took a lot of courage, or a lot of foolishness. I had no plan, no real resources, just a promise to a dying friend. Sometimes that's enough." Zachary poured more coffee, even though it was late and the stuff in the pot had grown bitter. "I told you about my sister, but I didn't tell you the whole story. When I helped her leave, her husband swore he'd kill me. Meant it too. One night he came at me with a knife outside a saloon. I had to fight him, hurt him pretty bad. He left town after that and I never saw him again. But I think about it sometimes, wonder if I did the right thing. The violence, I mean. You protected yourself and your sister. Of course you did the right thing. Maybe. But it weighs on you, knowing you're capable of that kind of thing, hurting someone even when it's justified." He looked at her directly. "If Carlson figures out you're here, if Garrett sends more men, I'll protect you and Samuel. Whatever it takes. I need you to know that." The intensity in his voice made Olivia's breath catch. "I know," she whispered, "and I'm grateful, more than I can say." They sat in silence, the air between them charged with something neither was quite ready to name. Olivia realized she'd been leaning closer to Zachary without meaning to, drawn to his warmth and strength. She made herself sit back, reminding herself of all the reasons she couldn't afford to feel what she was starting to feel. But when Zachary reached across the small space and took her hand, squeezing it gently before letting go, she couldn't quite convince herself that keeping distance was what she really wanted. The next week passed in tense watchfulness. Carlson was still in town, still asking questions, still offering his reward. Zachary reported that the man had talked to the shopkeepers, the hotel staff, anyone who might have seen a woman and child passing through. So far, no one had connected Olivia to the person in the photograph. Her short hair and work clothes served as an effective disguise, and she was careful to stay mostly out of sight. Samuel grew restless being confined to the stable. He was a child who needed to run and play, and keeping him cooped up felt cruel. Zachary did his best, playing simple games with the boy in the loft, teaching him card tricks and telling stories. But it wasn't enough, and they all felt the strain. One evening, Zachary came up with an idea. "There's a meadow about 2 miles from here, up in the hills. Nobody goes there much. We could take Samuel, let him run around a bit. Do it early morning before anyone else is up." "Is it safe?" Olivia asked, though she desperately wanted to say yes. "Safe enough. We'd have to be careful, keep watch, but the boy needs this, Olivia. He's starting to look pale and sad." So the next morning, well before dawn, they saddled 3 horses and rode out quietly. Samuel sat in front of Zachary, his eyes wide with excitement at this adventure. Olivia rode beside them on a gentle bay mare, feeling nervous and exhilarated in equal measure. The meadow was beautiful in the early light, carpeted with wildflowers and surrounded by pine trees. A small stream ran through it, clear and cold from the mountain snowmelt. Samuel gave a whoop of joy and ran in circles, his laughter bright in the still air. Olivia watched him, feeling her heart swell. This was what childhood should look like, freedom and joy and safety. "He's a good kid," Zachary said, standing beside her. "Going to grow up strong and kind, thanks to you." "Thanks to his mother," Olivia corrected. "And thanks to you." "I couldn't have done this alone, Zachary. I would have been caught weeks ago. You're stronger than you give yourself credit for." She turned to look at him, at his profile in the golden morning light. Without planning to, she said, "I'm glad we ended up here. Glad we found you." Zachary met her eyes, and something passed between them, an acknowledgement of feelings that had been building since that first night in the stable. "I'm glad, too," he said quietly. Samuel's shout interrupted the moment. He'd found a frog by the stream and was crouched beside it, trying to coax it onto his hand. They walked over together, and Zachary showed the boy how to cup his hands so the frog wouldn't jump away. Samuel's face was lit with wonder, and Olivia felt tears prick her eyes at the simple normalcy of it. They stayed in the meadow for 2 hours, letting Samuel play until he was tired and grass-stained and happy. On the ride back, the boy fell asleep against Zachary's chest, lulled by the steady rhythm of the horse's gait. Olivia rode beside them, feeling more at peace than she had in months. Back at the stable, they tucked Samuel into bed for a nap. He was asleep instantly, worn out from his adventure. Downstairs, Olivia helped Zachary unsaddle the horses and rub them down. "Thank you for this morning," she said. "It was exactly what he needed." "What all of us needed," Zachary replied. He hung up the saddle and turned to face her. "Olivia, I need to tell you something." Her heart began to pound. "What is it?" "I've been thinking a lot these past few weeks. About you and Samuel, about this situation, and about what I want." He took a breath. "I want you to stay, not just until Carlson leaves or until you figure out your next move. I want you to stay here with me, both of you." Olivia stared at him, not quite believing what she was hearing. "Zachary, you can't mean that. You barely know us." "I know enough. I know you're brave and loyal and kind. I know you'd do anything to protect that child. I know that when I see you first thing in the morning, I smile before I even realize I'm doing it. I know that I've been alone for a long time, and now that you're here, I don't want to be alone anymore. But this is complicated. Garrett is still looking for us, and he might never stop. If you're harboring us, you could get in serious trouble. I don't care about that." Zachary stepped closer, his eyes intense. "I care about you. I care about Samuel. And I'm asking you to give us, a chance." Olivia felt her carefully constructed walls beginning to crumble. She'd been so focused on survival, on running and hiding, that she hadn't let herself think about what came after. Hadn't let herself imagine a future that included anything but fear and flight. But standing here in the stable, with dust motes dancing in the sunlight and the smell of hay sweet in the air, she could almost see it. A life here with Zachary. Watching Samuel grow up safe and loved. Waking up beside a man who looked at her like she mattered, like she was someone worth keeping. "I care about you too," she whispered. "More than I should, probably, but Zachary, I'm scared. What if Garrett finds us? What if he takes Samuel? What if I bring nothing but trouble to your door? Then we'll face it together." He reached out and took her hand, his calloused palm warm against hers. "I'm not asking for promises you can't keep. I'm just asking you to consider staying to see where this might go. Can you do that?" She looked down at their joined hands, at the way her fingers fit between his like they'd been made that way. "Yes," she said finally, "I can do that." Zachary's smile was like sunrise, bright and warm and full of promise. He lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. "Good. That's real good, Olivia." They stood there for a long moment, just holding hands and smiling at each other like fools. Then they heard footsteps on the ladder and Samuel's sleepy voice calling for Olivia. The spell broke, but the feeling remained, a warm glow in Olivia's chest that stayed with her the rest of the day. That night, after Samuel was asleep, they sat closer together than usual in the office. Zachary told her stories about his childhood in Nevada, about his parents who died of influenza when he was 17, about his uncle who'd taken him in and taught him everything about horses. Olivia told him about growing up in an orphanage in Philadelphia, about learning to sew because the nuns said every girl needed a trade, about the long journey west looking for work and opportunity. Their lives had been hard in different ways, marked by loss and struggle. But talking about it felt like stitching wounds closed, the words a kind of healing. When Olivia finally stood to go up to the loft, Zachary caught her hand. "Thank you," he said. "For what? For trusting me, for staying, for giving me something to hope for." She squeezed his hand, feeling brave in the darkness. "Thank you for saving us, for being exactly the kind of man we needed to find." She kissed his cheek quickly, then climbed the ladder before she could lose her nerve. Above, she pressed her cool hands to her warm face and let herself smile. 2 days later, everything changed. Olivia was in the stable office doing the books for Zachary when she heard horses outside. Multiple horses, moving fast. She looked out the window and felt her blood turn to ice. Carlson was there, and he'd brought 4 other men with him. They dismounted with purpose, and Carlson's face wore a look of grim satisfaction. "Wells," he called out, "I know you're in there. Come on out." Zachary emerged from one of the stalls, his expression carefully neutral. "Something I can help you with. You lied to me," Carlson said. "Told me you hadn't seen the woman, but I've been asking around and someone mentioned you've got a woman working here. Short hair, keeps to herself. That's interesting, don't you think?" "I've got someone helping out," Zachary said evenly. "That's not a crime." "It is if she's the woman I'm looking for. I'd like to see her if you don't mind." "I mind plenty. This is private property and you're not the law. You've got no right to demand anything." One of the other men stepped forward, his hand resting on the gun at his hip. "Mr. Garrett has authorized us to recover his son by any means necessary. You can cooperate or we can make this difficult." Upstairs, Olivia heard everything. She looked at Samuel, who'd gone pale and still. Moving quickly, she grabbed their few belongings and stuffed them into a bag. Her mind raced through options. The back window overlooked the corral. If they could get out that way, maybe reach the trees beyond. But even as she thought it, she heard footsteps on the ladder. One of Garrett's men appeared in the loft, blocking their escape. He was young, maybe 20, with hard eyes and a gun in his hand. "Well, well," he said. Looks like we found what we're looking for. Please, Olivia said, putting herself between the man and Samuel. Please just let the boy stay. He's safe here, he's happy. His father doesn't love him, doesn't want him except as a possession. That's not my concern, the man said. Now come on down, both of you. Mr. Carlson wants to talk to you. They had no choice. Olivia took Samuel's hand and descended the ladder, her heart in her throat. Below, Zachary's face was a mask of barely contained rage. Carlson smiled when he saw them. Miss Nash, I presume, you've led us on quite a chase. He looked at Samuel. Hello, boy. Your father's been very worried about you. I don't want to go back, Samuel said, his voice shaking. Please, I want to stay with Miss Olivia and Mr. Zachary. I'm afraid that's not possible. You belong with your father. He's going to hurt me, Samuel said and started to cry. Carlson's expression didn't change. You're confused, child. Your father loves you. Miss Nash has been filling your head with lies. They're not lies, Zachary said, his voice hard. The boy is terrified of his father, and with good reason. Thomas Garrett is a cruel man who has no business raising a child. That's quite an accusation, Carlson said mildly. Do you have proof? Ask Samuel about the bruises. Ask him about being locked in cellars and struck across the face. Children make things up. They're dramatic. Zachary took a step forward, his fists clenched. I'm not letting you take them. The men with Carlson all drew their guns, the metallic clicks loud in the sudden silence. Carlson shook his head slowly. Mr. Wells, I appreciate your misguided sense of chivalry, but this is over. We're taking the boy back to his father. Miss Nash will face charges for kidnapping. If you interfere, you'll be charged as an accomplice. I suggest you stand aside. For a long, terrible moment, Olivia thought Zachary was going to fight anyway. She could see the war in his eyes, the desperate desire to protect them battling against the reality of 5 armed men. She shook her head at him slightly, silently pleading for him not to get himself killed for them. But before anyone could move, a new voice cut through the tension. Seems like there's quite a commotion here. Everyone turned. Standing in the stable doorway was the sheriff of Downeyville, a grizzled man in his 50s with a star on his chest and a rifle in his hands. Behind him were 2 deputies, also armed. Sheriff Dalton, Carlson said smoothly. Perfect timing. We're here to recover a kidnapped child. This woman, Olivia Nash, stole him from his father in Missouri. We have legal authority to take him back. Sheriff Dalton looked around the stable, his eyes taking in the drawn guns, the frightened child, the protective way Zachary and Olivia stood. That's so. You got paperwork to prove this legal authority? Of course. Carlson produced documents from his coat. Orders from a judge in St. Louis, authorizing the recovery of Samuel Garrett and the arrest of Olivia Nash for kidnapping. The sheriff examined the papers carefully. Then he looked at Olivia. You want to tell your side of this, madam? Olivia's voice shook, but she forced the words out. Samuel's mother was my friend. His father was abusing him. She took him and ran, but she died of consumption. Before she died, she made me promise to keep Samuel safe. I'm not a kidnapper, Sheriff. I'm just trying to protect a child from a cruel man. That's a serious accusation, Dalton said. It's a lie, Carlson countered. Thomas Garrett is a respected businessman. This woman is delusional. I'm not lying, Samuel said suddenly, his voice small but clear. My father hurts me. He hit me and locked me in the dark and said I was weak. Mama tried to stop him, but he wouldn't listen. I don't want to go back. Please don't make me go back. The sheriff looked at the boy for a long moment. Then he sighed heavily and lowered his rifle. Well, this is a mess. Carlson, I can see your paperwork is in order, but I've also got a child here saying he's afraid of his father. That puts me in a difficult position. The law is clear, Carlson said. The boy belongs with his father. Maybe so. But California law also says I have an obligation to protect children from harm. So here's what's going to happen. I'm taking everyone into town and we're going to sort this out proper. Miss Nash, you'll need to come along. You too, Mr. Carlson. And the boy stays with me until we figure out the truth. That's unacceptable, Carlson said. That's the way it's going to be, Dalton replied, his voice hard. Unless you want to challenge my authority in my own town, Carlson's jaw worked, but he nodded curtly. Fine. But I'm sending a telegram to Mr. Garrett immediately. He'll have his lawyers here within days. He can bring all the lawyers he wants. Now everyone put your guns away before someone gets hurt. The tension diffused slowly. Garrett's men holstered their weapons, and Zachary moved to stand beside Olivia and Samuel. The sheriff gestured toward the door. Come on, then. Let's go get this sorted. As they walked toward town, Zachary managed to lean close to Olivia and whisper, Dalton's a fair man. Tell him everything. She nodded, trying to take comfort in his words, but fear had settled in her chest like a stone. They'd been found. The law was involved, and Thomas Garrett had money and influence on his side. The odds didn't look good. At the sheriff's office, Dalton separated them for questioning. He spoke with Olivia first, listening carefully as she told the whole story from beginning to end. She didn't spare any details, describing Margaret's death, Samuel's injuries, Garrett's cold indifference to his son's fear. She showed him the letter Margaret had written before she died, the one Olivia had carried with her all these weeks, where Margaret begged whoever found it to keep Samuel away from his father. This is all very troubling, Dalton said when she finished. But it's also your word and a dead woman's letter against a wealthy man's reputation. Samuel will tell you the same thing, Olivia said. Ask him about his father. Listen to what he says. Dalton did talk to Samuel, gently and patiently. The boy confirmed everything Olivia had said, his small voice steady as he described his father's cruelty. When the sheriff asked if he wanted to go home to Missouri, Samuel shook his head vehemently. I want to stay with Miss Olivia and Mr. Zachary. They're nice to me. They don't hurt me. After everyone had been questioned, Dalton sat behind his desk, looking troubled. Carlson stood on one side of the room, Olivia and Zachary on the other, with Samuel between them holding Olivia's hand. Here's my conclusion, the sheriff said. Miss Nash, you did technically take a child without legal authority, but given the circumstances, I'm inclined to believe you acted out of genuine concern for the boy's welfare. The question is what to do about it. The question is simple, Carlson said. The law requires the child be returned to his father. The law also gives me some discretion in cases involving children's safety, Dalton replied. I'm going to hold off on making any decisions until we can get more information. That means Miss Nash stays in town. No more running. Samuel will stay with a local family, the Hendersons, who have fostered children before. They're good people, and he'll be safe there while this gets sorted out. No, Samuel cried, clinging to Olivia. I want to stay with you. Olivia knelt down and hugged him, her own eyes swimming with tears. It's okay, sweetheart. It's just for a little while. The sheriff needs to make sure everything is done properly, but I'm not going anywhere. I'll be right here. Promise? I promise. The Hendersons turned out to be a kind older couple who ran a dry goods store. They had raised 6 children of their own and had gentle, patient ways. Samuel went with them reluctantly, looking back at Olivia with frightened eyes. After he was gone, Dalton looked at Olivia and Zachary. Miss Nash, you'll need to stay within town limits. I'm not arresting you yet, but I need to know where you are. Mr. Wells, I assume you'll vouch for her. Absolutely, Zachary said firmly. Good. Now everyone get out of my office. I've got telegrams to send and a lot of thinking to do. Outside the sheriff's office, Olivia felt her legs go weak. Zachary caught her, his arm around her waist. "Come on," he said softly. "Let's get you somewhere quiet." He took her to the boarding house and paid for a room, insisting she needed rest. In the small, plain room, Olivia finally broke down, sobbing into her hands. Zachary sat beside her on the bed and pulled her against his chest, his arms strong and warm around her. "I've ruined everything," she choked out. "They're going to take him back to Garrett. All of this was for nothing." "It wasn't for nothing," Zachary said fiercely. "You gave Samuel months of safety and love. You showed him that the world has good people in it, not just his father. And this isn't over yet. Dalton's a fair man. He'll do the right thing." "How can you be sure?" "Because I've known him for years. He takes his job seriously, and he doesn't like bullies. Garrett might have money, but Dalton can't be bought." Olivia wanted to believe him, but fear had taken root deep in her bones. She'd seen how the world worked. Money and power usually won over truth and justice. But Zachary's arms around her were solid and real. His heartbeat under her ear was steady and sure. She clung to him like an anchor in a storm. "I love you," she whispered, the words spilling out before she could stop them. "I know it's too soon and everything is a mess, but I need you to know." "I love you, Zachary Wells." She felt him go still. Then he tilted her face up to his thumb brushing away her tears. "I love you too, Olivia Nash, and I'm going to fight for you and Samuel with everything I've got. We're going to get through this." When he kissed her, it tasted of salt and desperation and promise. Olivia kissed him back, pouring everything she felt into it, all her fear and hope and love. When they finally broke apart, they stayed close, foreheads pressed together, breathing each other's air. "Stay here tonight," Zachary said. "Rest. I'll come by in the morning and we'll figure out our next move." "Don't leave yet," Olivia whispered. "Please, just stay a little longer." So he stayed, holding her as the sun set and darkness filled the room. They talked quietly about nothing and everything, words weaving between them like thread, stitching their hearts closer together. When Zachary finally left, well after midnight, Olivia lay awake in the darkness. She thought about Margaret, about the promise she'd made. She thought about Samuel, about his small hand in hers and his trust in her to keep him safe. She thought about Zachary, about the unexpected gift of finding love in the midst of chaos. And she thought about Thomas Garrett, about his money and his power and his determination to get his son back. But she'd come this far. She'd run across half the country, had protected Samuel through danger and hardship, had found allies when she'd thought she was alone. She wasn't going to give up now. If Garrett wanted a fight, she'd give him one. The next few days were agonizing. Carlson sent his telegram, and soon word came back that Thomas Garrett himself was coming to Downeyville, along with a lawyer from San Francisco. The arrival was expected within the week. Olivia visited Samuel every day at the Henderson store. The boy was being treated well, but he was anxious and clingy, afraid that any moment he'd be taken away. She did her best to comfort him, reading him stories and playing simple games, but her own fear made it hard to be reassuring. Zachary was her constant support. He sat with her during the long waits at the sheriff's office. He held her hand during the difficult conversations with Dalton. He reminded her to eat when she forgot and held her when the fear became too much. "We should run," Olivia said one night. "Take Samuel and disappear. Mexico, maybe, or Canada." "They'd find you," Zachary said, "and it would make you look guilty. We have to see this through, trust that the truth will matter." "What if it doesn't?" "Then we'll deal with that when it comes. But I still believe Dalton will do right by Samuel." Olivia wished she shared his faith. Thomas Garrett arrived in Downeyville on a Tuesday morning. Olivia saw him from the window of the boarding house, stepping down from a private coach, dressed in expensive clothes that marked him as wealthy even from a distance. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with silver threading through his dark hair and a face that might have been handsome if not for the coldness in his expression. Behind him came a man in a suit carrying a leather case, presumably the lawyer. They went directly to the hotel, and within an hour, everyone was summoned to the sheriff's office for a meeting. Olivia's hands shook as she walked there with Zachary. This was it, the moment she'd been dreading, face to face with the man she'd been running from. Inside the sheriff's office, Garrett stood with his lawyer, a sharp-faced man named Whitmore. Carlson was there too, looking satisfied. Sheriff Dalton sat behind his desk, his expression unreadable. When Garrett saw Olivia, his eyes narrowed. "So you're the woman who stole my son." His voice was cultured, educated, and completely devoid of warmth. "I didn't steal him," Olivia said, forcing her voice to stay steady. "His mother asked me to protect him from you. Margaret was hysterical and ill. She filled your head with lies about me." Garrett turned to Dalton. "Sheriff, I want my son returned to me immediately. I've been patient, but this has gone on long enough." "Mr. Garrett, I appreciate you coming all this way," Dalton said, "but we've got a situation here that needs careful consideration. Your son has made some serious accusations about your treatment of him. He's 4 years old and has been influenced by unstable women. Children that age don't understand discipline." "There's discipline, and there's abuse," Zachary said, speaking for the first time. "And from what Samuel's told us, you crossed that line." Garrett looked at Zachary with contempt. "And who are you? Someone who cares about that boy's welfare more than you apparently do. How dare you?" Garrett's face flushed with anger. "I am Samuel's father. I have legal rights, and I will not be lectured by some stable hand." "Gentlemen, that's enough," Dalton said firmly. "Mr. Garrett, I need to ask you some questions about your treatment of Samuel. There are allegations that you struck him, locked him in cellars, subjected him to harsh punishments. I disciplined him when necessary. Boys need firm guidance to grow into strong men. Did you ever hit him hard enough to leave bruises?" Garrett's jaw tightened. "I may have struck him once or twice when he was particularly disobedient. It was for his own good." The admission hung in the air. Olivia felt a spark of hope. He just confirmed what Samuel had said, but Whitmore, the lawyer, stepped in smoothly. "Corporal punishment is legal and widely practiced, Sheriff. Many parents believe in spare the rod, spoil the child. Mr. Garrett's methods may seem strict to some, but they don't constitute abuse under the law." "The law gives parents broad authority," Dalton acknowledged. "But it also protects children from harm. Has the boy been harmed in any way that requires medical attention? Does he bear any scars or injuries?" "Well, no, but then there's no evidence of abuse, only the word of a frightened child who's been manipulated by Miss Nash." Whitmore opened his case and pulled out more documents. "We have multiple affidavits from servants in Mr. Garrett's household, all attesting to his good character and his love for his son. We have letters from prominent citizens of St. Louis vouching for him. We have everything needed to prove that Mr. Garrett is a fit parent and that Miss Nash had no legal right to take the child." Olivia felt the hope drain out of her. Of course Garrett had prepared. Of course he'd brought evidence and witnesses. Money could buy anything, including testimony. "Miss Nash acted out of concern for the child's welfare," Zachary argued. "That has to count for something." "Her concern was misplaced," Whitmore said, "and her actions were illegal. She could face serious criminal charges. However, Mr. Garrett is willing to be lenient if his son is returned to him immediately without further delay." Dalton looked troubled. He glanced at Olivia, then at the papers in front of him. "I need to think about this, and I need to talk to the boy again." "The boy has been questioned multiple times," Garrett said impatiently. Enough is enough, Sheriff. I want my son. And I want to make sure I'm doing the right thing, Dalton said firmly. You'll have my decision tomorrow. Garrett clearly wanted to argue, but Whitmore put a hand on his arm. Tomorrow is acceptable, but we expect a favorable resolution, Sheriff, or there will be consequences. After they left, Olivia felt like she might be sick. Zachary's hand found hers and squeezed. It's not over, he said, but it felt over. It felt like all their efforts had been for nothing. That night, Olivia couldn't sleep. She paced her room at the boarding house, her mind churning through options that all led nowhere. Around midnight, there was a soft knock on her door. She opened it to find Zachary standing there. I couldn't sleep either, he said. She pulled him inside and into her arms, holding him like he was the only solid thing in a world that had turned to quicksand. They stood like that for a long time, just holding each other in the darkness. What are we going to do? Olivia whispered. We're going to hope that Dalton sees through Garrett's performance, and if he doesn't, then we'll figure out another way. What other way? If Dalton orders Samuel returned to his father, that's it. The law will be on Garrett's side. The law isn't the only thing that matters, Zachary said. Sometimes you have to do what's right, even if it's not legal. Olivia pulled back to look at him. You're talking about running. If it comes to that, yes. I won't let that man take Samuel back to a life of fear and pain, and I won't let you face charges for trying to protect him. Zachary, you can't throw your whole life away for us. You're not listening, he said, taking her face in his hands. You are my life now, you and Samuel. These past few weeks, you've given me something I didn't even know I was missing. Purpose, connection, love. I'm not going to let that go. So if we need to run, we run, together. Olivia felt tears spill down her cheeks. I love you so much. I love you too. He kissed her softly, then deeper, and Olivia let herself sink into him. For a little while, in the darkness of her room, there was only the two of them, only the love they'd found in the midst of chaos. They made love that night, gentle and desperate, affirming life in the face of fear. Afterward, they lay tangled together, and Zachary told her about a place in the mountains he knew, a cabin that had belonged to a hermit who died years ago. It was remote, hidden, a place where they could disappear if they needed to. We'd have to be smart about it, he said. Leave no trail. But we could make it work, build a life there, the three of us. Olivia traced her fingers over his chest, memorizing the feel of him. What about your stable, your business? I'd miss it, but I'd miss you more. He caught her hand and brought it to his lips. I've already lost too many people I love. I'm not losing you too. They fell asleep wrapped around each other, and for a few hours, Olivia felt almost at peace. Morning came too soon. They dressed and went to the sheriff's office, where Dalton had said he'd announce his decision. Garrett and his lawyer were already there, looking confident. Carlson stood in the corner with a satisfied smirk. Samuel had been brought by Mrs. Henderson, and the boy immediately ran to Olivia, burying his face in her skirts. She picked him up, holding him close, and he wrapped his arms around her neck. Is my father taking me away? He whispered. I don't know, sweetheart. We'll see what the sheriff says. Dalton came in looking like he hadn't slept much either. He sat behind his desk and looked around at everyone assembled. I've given this situation a lot of thought, he began. And I've consulted with a judge friend of mine about the legal aspects. Here's what I've concluded. Mr. Garrett, you have legal custody of your son, that's clear. Miss Nash had no legal right to take him, even if her intentions were good. The law is on your side. Garrett smiled slightly. Thank you, Sheriff. Now if you'll arrange for Samuel to be— I'm not finished, Dalton interrupted. The law may be on your side, but I've also got my own authority as sheriff to consider the welfare of children in my jurisdiction. And after talking to Samuel multiple times, after hearing his fear and seeing how he responds to you. I've got serious concerns." "Concerns based on a child's imagination," Whitmore said. "Maybe, but I'm not willing to just hand the boy over without some assurances." Dalton looked directly at Garrett. "I'm proposing a compromise. Samuel goes back to St. Louis with you, but under supervision. I'll arrange for regular check-ins with the authorities there, people who'll visit your home and make sure the boy is being treated well. If there's any sign of abuse, any evidence that he's being mistreated, custody will be reviewed." "That's outrageous," Garrett said, his face darkening. "You have no authority to impose conditions on how I raise my son." "I have the authority to delay his return if I believe he's in danger," Dalton countered. "You can accept my compromise, or we can drag this through the courts for months. Your choice." Whitmore and Garrett conferred in low voices. Finally, Whitmore spoke. "We'll accept the supervision, but only for 3 months. After that, Mr. Garrett's rights as a parent must be respected without interference." Dalton nodded. 3 months, and Miss Nash, given the circumstances, I'm not pressing charges. But you need to understand that if you interfere again, if you try to take Samuel, I will arrest you. Are we clear?" Olivia felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. Samuel was going back to his father. All of this, all the running and hiding and hoping, had been for nothing. "No," Samuel said, his voice small but clear. "No, I don't want to go. Please don't make me go." He was crying now, clinging to Olivia with desperate strength. She held him tight, her own tears falling into his hair. "I'm sorry, sweetheart," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." Garrett stepped forward and tried to take Samuel from her arms. The boy screamed and kicked, fighting with everything he had. It took both Garrett and Carlson to pry him away, and Samuel's cries of "Olivia, Olivia," echoed through the office. Zachary had to physically hold Olivia back to keep her from trying to take the boy back. She fought against him, sobbing, watching Samuel's terrified face as Garrett carried him out of the office. When they were gone, Olivia collapsed. Zachary caught her, lowering them both to the floor, and she sobbed against his chest, broken and defeated. It was Mrs. Henderson who finally got Olivia to her feet, who helped her back to the boarding house. Zachary stayed close, his face hard and angry but his hands gentle on Olivia. In her room, Olivia couldn't stop shaking. She'd failed. She'd failed Margaret, failed Samuel, failed everyone. "We're not done," Zachary said fiercely. 3 months, Olivia. 3 months of supervision. If Garrett hurts Samuel again, there will be evidence. The authorities will see it. And if they don't, if he's smart enough to hide it, careful enough not to leave obvious marks. Olivia looked at him with desperate eyes. "He'll get away with it, Zachary. Men like him always do. Then we'll find another way. I'm not giving up, and neither are you. We're going to keep fighting for that boy." "But how?" Olivia wondered. "How did you fight money and power and the law itself?" Over the next few days, Olivia moved through life in a fog. She went back to helping Zachary at the stable because she needed something to do with her hands, needed the physical work to keep from thinking too much. But Samuel's absence was a constant ache, a wound that wouldn't heal. Zachary was endlessly patient with her, letting her cry when she needed to, holding her when the grief became too much. At night, they lay together in the loft, and he'd talk about the future, about when this was all over and they could build the life they wanted. But Olivia found it hard to imagine a future that didn't include Samuel. 2 weeks after Garrett took the boy back to St. Louis, a letter arrived. It was from Samuel, dictated to someone else because he couldn't write yet. The words were simple and heartbreaking. "Dear Miss Olivia, I miss you. I miss Mr. Zachary. Father says I must forget about you, but I cannot. I think about you every day. I am trying to be good so Father doesn't get angry. I hope you are well. Love, Samuel." Olivia read the letter over and over until the words blurred with her tears. Zachary held her while she wept. "We have to do something," she said. "We can't just leave him there." "I know. I've been thinking about that." Zachary pulled back to look at her. "What if we went to St. Louis, not to take Samuel, but to be there, to watch, to make sure the supervision is actually happening, to be ready if things go wrong? You do that, leave your stable, your life here. For you, for Samuel, yes, I already told you, Olivia, you're my life now." The idea took root. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was something. Action instead of helpless waiting. They made plans. Zachary arranged for a friend to watch the stable. Olivia packed their few belongings. Within a week, they were on a stagecoach heading east, back toward the very place Olivia had fled from months ago. The journey took weeks, long days of dusty travel and uncomfortable nights in way stations. But having Zachary beside her made it bearable. They talked about everything and nothing, learning each other's thoughts and dreams. They played cards to pass the time, read aloud from a book of poetry Zachary had bought, watched the landscape change as they crossed mountains and plains. And slowly, Olivia began to hope again. Maybe they couldn't change the law, couldn't force Garrett to be a good father, but they could be present in Samuel's life, could make sure he knew he wasn't forgotten or alone. St. Louis was as Olivia remembered it, bustling and grimy, full of smoke from factories and the sound of riverboats on the Mississippi. They found a modest boarding house near the district where Garrett lived, and Zachary found work at a nearby stable to pay their expenses. The supervision that Dalton had arranged turned out to be perfunctory at best. A social worker visited the Garrett house once a week, spending perhaps half an hour there. Olivia managed to meet the woman, a tired-looking widow named Mrs. Patterson, and asked about Samuel. "The boy seems fine," Mrs. Patterson said. "A bit quiet but well-fed and clean. Mr. Garrett is very proper in his interactions with the child during my visits." "Just during your visits?" Olivia asked. Mrs. Patterson gave her a sharp look. "I can only report what I see, Miss Nash. And what I see is a wealthy man providing for his son." Olivia and Zachary tried to see Samuel themselves, but Garrett had given orders that they were to be kept away. The servants wouldn't let them in the house, and when they tried to catch Samuel in the garden, they were threatened with the police. It was torture, being so close but unable to reach him. Then, 6 weeks after they'd arrived in St. Louis, everything changed again. Olivia was at the market when she saw her. A young woman, maybe 19 or 20, with a bruised face and frightened eyes. She was buying vegetables, and when she turned, Olivia recognized the uniform of the Garrett household. Olivia approached carefully. "Excuse me, do you work for Thomas Garrett?" The girl's eyes went wide with fear. "I don't want any trouble. I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm a friend of Samuel's. I just want to know how he is." The girl looked around nervously, then leaned in close. "He's not well, miss. The boy, I mean. Mr. Garrett is strict with him, harsh. I've heard him crying at night, and yesterday." She hesitated. "Please," Olivia said urgently. "Yesterday what?" "I saw Mr. Garrett grab Samuel's arm hard enough to leave marks. The boy had dropped a glass at dinner. It was an accident, but Mr. Garrett was furious. He dragged Samuel upstairs, and I heard shouting. When I saw the boy this morning, he was limping." Cold fury washed through Olivia. "Would you be willing to tell this to the authorities?" The girl shook her head violently. "I can't. Mr. Garrett would dismiss me without references. I'd never find work again. I'm sorry, I've already said too much." She hurried away before Olivia could say more. Olivia went straight home and told Zachary everything. His face went dark with anger. "We need to tell Mrs. Patterson. Make her do a surprise visit." They tried, but Mrs. Patterson was dismissive. "Servants gossip, Miss Nash. And even if it's true that Mr. Garrett was stern with the boy, that's not illegal. I can't go barging into a prominent citizen's home based on hearsay. A child is being hurt, Olivia said desperately. So you say. But I have no proof, and my authority only goes so far. I'm sorry, but unless there's clear evidence of severe abuse, my hands are tied. Olivia and Zachary left the woman's office feeling helpless and enraged. The system that was supposed to protect Samuel was failing him. We have to get him out, Olivia said. I don't care about the law anymore. We have to get Samuel out of that house. I agree, Zachary said grimly, but we have to be smart about it. If we just snatch him in broad daylight, we'll be caught immediately. They spent days planning, watching the Garrett house, learning the routines of the household. They discovered that Samuel was sometimes taken to a nearby park by his tutor in the afternoons. The tutor was a young man, distracted and more interested in reading his book than watching his charge. That was their opportunity. On a Thursday afternoon, they went to the park. Sure enough, Samuel arrived with his tutor, and the man settled on a bench with a novel while Samuel played listlessly near a fountain. Olivia approached slowly, her heart hammering. "Samuel," she called softly. The boy's head whipped around and his face transformed with joy. "Miss Olivia." He started to run to her, then stopped, looking back at his tutor nervously. "It's all right," Olivia said. "Come here, sweetheart." Samuel came, and Olivia knelt down, hugging him tight. She could feel how thin he'd gotten, could see the shadows under his eyes. "Are you all right?" she asked. "Father is angry a lot," Samuel whispered. "I try to be good, but I'm not good enough. Miss Olivia, can I come live with you again, please?" Before she could answer, Zachary appeared. He'd been watching to make sure the tutor didn't notice. "We need to go now," he said urgently. Olivia made a decision in that split second. She took Samuel's hand. "Yes, sweetheart, you can come with us. Hold on tight." They walked quickly out of the park, Zachary keeping himself between them and the tutor. By the time the young man looked up and realized his charge was gone, they were already disappearing into the crowded streets. They didn't go back to their boarding house. Instead, they went straight to the train station, where Zachary had already purchased tickets for a westbound train leaving in an hour. It was a risk, but they'd planned for this possibility. Samuel clung to Olivia the entire time, his small body shaking. "Father will be so angry." "He won't find us," Olivia promised. "We're going far away, somewhere safe. Back to Mr. Zachary's stable? No, somewhere new, somewhere no one will look for us." The train pulled out of St. Louis just as the sun was setting. Olivia watched the city disappear and felt both fear and relief. They were fugitives now, truly and completely. There would be no going back, but Samuel was safe. That was all that mattered. They traveled for days, changing trains multiple times to obscure their trail. Zachary had a plan, a place he'd been thinking about since they left California. His uncle, before settling in Downeyville, had tried his hand at ranching in Montana Territory. The ranch had failed, but the land was still there, a small cabin on a remote stretch of prairie. "It's not much," Zachary told Olivia as they rode the final miles on horseback, Samuel sitting in front of him. "But it's isolated. Garrett would never think to look there." The cabin was rough, just 2 rooms and a loft, with chinking that needed repair and a roof that had seen better days. But it was surrounded by miles of open land, with mountains in the distance and a stream running nearby. The kind of place where people could disappear. They settled in, Zachary making repairs while Olivia cleaned and organized. Samuel helped where he could, and slowly, the fear began to leave his eyes. He started to smile again, to laugh, to be the child he should have been all along. The work was hard but satisfying. Zachary hunted for meat and caught fish in the stream. Olivia planted a garden with seeds they'd bought at the last town. Samuel learned to gather eggs from the chickens they'd acquired to help with the chores, to ride the gentle mare Zachary had bought for him. At night, they'd sit by the fire, the three of them together. Zachary would tell stories, or Olivia would sing songs she remembered from her childhood. Samuel would fall asleep between them, safe and loved. And on those nights, lying in bed with Zachary beside her and Samuel sleeping peacefully in the loft above, Olivia felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time. She felt like she was home. Months passed. They stayed vigilant, always aware that Garrett might still be looking. But as time went on and no one came, they began to relax, to believe they might actually have escaped for good. Samuel thrived in the open space. He grew taller, filled out, lost the nervous jumpiness that had marked him in his father's house. He called Zachary and Olivia Mama and Papa now, and neither of them corrected him. In every way that mattered, they were his parents. One evening, as they sat watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and red, Zachary turned to Olivia. "Marry me," he said. She looked at him, at his dear face and steady eyes. "We can't legally marry. We're fugitives, remember? No paperwork, no records. Then we'll marry in our own way, in front of God and Samuel and the mountains. That's enough for me. Is it enough for you?" Olivia felt tears prick her eyes, but they were happy tears this time. Yes, it's more than enough. They married themselves a week later under the wide Montana sky. They spoke vows they'd written, promising to love and protect each other, to raise Samuel together, to build a life out of the ruins they'd fled from. Samuel stood as their witness, beaming with pride, and they sealed their promises with a kiss while the wind whispered through the prairie grass. That night, lying in their bed as husband and wife in every way that truly mattered, Zachary held Olivia close. "I know this isn't the life you imagined," he said. "Hiding out here, always looking over our shoulders. It's better than anything I imagined," Olivia replied honestly. "I have you. I have Samuel, I have a home and a purpose and love. What more could I possibly need? A real wedding, maybe, with a church and a dress and all the proper things. Those are just trappings. This is real, Zachary. This is the realest thing I've ever known." He kissed her softly. "I love you, Mrs. Wells." She smiled against his lips. "I love you too, Mr. Wells." A year into their life in Montana, Olivia discovered she was pregnant. The realization came with equal parts joy and terror. Bringing a child into their fugitive existence seemed risky, but when she told Zachary, his face lit up with such happiness that her fears couldn't stand against it. "A baby," he breathed, his hand going to her still flat stomach. "Our baby." Samuel was thrilled at the prospect of being a big brother. He helped Olivia with extra chores as her pregnancy progressed, insisted on fetching things for her, told the baby stories through her belly. The birth happened on a cold February night, with only Zachary to help. It was terrifying and painful, and the most incredible thing Olivia had ever experienced. When she finally held her son, tiny and red-faced and perfect, she wept with overwhelming love. They named him Matthew, and he was the image of his father with dark hair and hazel eyes. Samuel doted on his little brother, gentle and protective. Watching Samuel hold the baby, seeing the tender care in his young face, Olivia knew they'd made the right choices. This was worth everything they'd given up. Life continued, the rhythm of seasons marking time. Samuel started learning to read from an old primer they'd bought at a trading post. Matthew grew from infant to toddler, chasing chickens and getting into everything. Zachary built additions to the cabin, making more space for their growing family. They made occasional trips to the nearest town for supplies, always careful, always watchful. But Garrett's reach apparently didn't extend to the remote territories, or perhaps he'd finally given up. Either way, They saw no signs of pursuit. When Matthew was 2, Olivia discovered she was pregnant again. This time the terror was less, the joy more immediate. She knew what to expect, knew they could handle it. Their daughter was born in summer, in a cabin filled with sunlight and love. She had Olivia's brown hair and Zachary's smile, and they named her Margaret, after the friend whose dying wish had started everything. Samuel, now 8 years old, was a wonderful big brother to both younger children. He'd grown tall and strong, with none of his father's cruelty in him. He was gentle and kind. Everything Thomas Garrett wasn't. One evening after the children were asleep, Olivia and Zachary sat outside watching the stars emerge. "You think he stopped looking?" Olivia asked. She didn't have to specify who she meant. "I think so," Zachary said. "It's been years. Even Garrett's pride has to have its limits. I still worry sometimes that one day someone will show up, that it will all come crashing down." Zachary took her hand. "If that day comes, we'll face it, but I don't think it will. We're too far away, been gone too long. And legally, Samuel's probably not even his concern anymore. At some point the law has to declare someone lost or dead." "Maybe," Olivia said, but she couldn't quite let go of the fear, couldn't quite believe they were truly safe. The answer came unexpectedly 2 years later. Zachary had gone to town for supplies, a trip that usually took 2 days. When he returned, his face was strange, troubled, and relieved at once. "What is it?" Olivia asked immediately. "I heard news," he said. "About Thomas Garrett." Olivia's heart stuttered. "What news?" "He's dead. Died 6 months ago, apparently. Heart failure." The words hung in the air. Dead. Garrett was dead. Samuel, now 10, had been listening from the doorway. "My father is dead," Zachary nodded. "Yes, son, he can't hurt you anymore, can't come looking for you, you're free." Samuel's face went through a complicated series of expressions. He'd long since stopped thinking of Garrett as his father in any real sense, but the news still affected him. Finally, he just nodded. "Good," he said simply, then went back to playing with his younger siblings. After he left, Olivia let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding for years. "We're really free." "We're really free," Zachary confirmed, pulling her into his arms. "No more running. No more hiding. We can live our lives without fear." Olivia sobbed against his chest, all the tension and terror of the past years finally releasing. They'd done it. They'd protected Samuel, built a family, survived. In the years that followed, life blossomed in ways Olivia had never dared to imagine. Without the shadow of pursuit hanging over them, they could truly settle in. Zachary proved to be a skilled rancher, and their modest homestead grew into a prosperous operation. They acquired more cattle, more land, built a proper house with separate bedrooms for the children, and a real kitchen where Olivia could bake bread and pies. Samuel grew into a fine young man, good with horses and gentle with his younger siblings. He remembered his birth mother with love, and while he knew the truth about his biological father, he never doubted who his real parents were. He called Zachary and Olivia Mama and Papa without hesitation, and they were proud to claim him as their son. Matthew and little Margaret grew up knowing only love and security. They ran wild across the prairie, learned to ride and rope and help with the ranch work. They attended a small school that had been established in the growing town nearby, learning reading and arithmetic and geography. Olivia and Zachary added 2 more children to their family over the years, another boy and another girl. The house was full of noise and laughter, of children's quarrels and reconciliations, of the beautiful chaos of family life. On their 10th anniversary of that vow-speaking day under the Montana sky, Zachary took Olivia back to that same spot. The children were old enough to stay home for a few hours under Samuel's watchful care. 10 years, Zachary said, holding her hand. 10 years since I asked you to marry me here." "Best decision I ever made," Olivia said, leaning into his warmth. "I got you something." He pulled a small box from his pocket and opened it to reveal a simple gold band. "I know we don't need this, that the vows we spoke were enough, but I wanted you to have it anyway. A symbol of everything we've built together." Olivia's eyes filled with tears as he slipped the ring onto her finger. "It's beautiful. You're beautiful. You're brave and strong and the best thing that ever happened to me." He cupped her face in his hands. "I love you more now than I did 10 years ago, and I'll love you more 10 years from now. Forever, Olivia, that's how long I'm yours." "Forever," she echoed, kissing him. "That's how long I'm yours too." They stood there as the sun set. Two people who'd found each other in the midst of chaos and built something lasting from it. Two people who'd chosen love over fear, courage over safety, family over the easy path. As they walked back to the house, they could hear their children's voices carrying on the evening breeze. Samuel was teaching Matthew how to whistle. Margaret was singing a song. The youngest two were arguing about something inconsequential and precious. It was the sound of home, of happiness, of a life well lived. Olivia thought about Margaret Nash, the friend who died and whose last wish had set all this in motion. She thought about that frightened woman in the grain mill in Downeyville, holding a terrified child and wondering if they'd survive the night. She thought about Zachary's voice saying, "Your secrets are safe with me. So are you both." And she thought about everything that had come after. The running and hiding, yes, but also the falling in love. The fear, yes, but also the courage. The loss, yes, but also the finding of something better than she'd ever imagined. "What are you thinking about?" Zachary asked, noticing her smile. "About how far we've come. About how a promise to a dying friend led me to everything I never knew I needed." "You have any regrets?" Olivia looked at the house ahead, warm with lamplight and full of love. She looked at the man beside her, her husband in every way that mattered. She thought about the children waiting inside, the life they'd built from desperation and determination. "Not a single one," she said. And as they walked into the house, into the waiting arms of their family, Olivia knew it was true. Every choice, every risk, every terrifying moment had been worth it for this. For love, for family, for the life they'd claimed for themselves against all odds. The story that had started with a woman hiding a child and a cowboy offering protection had become something more. It had become a love story, a family story, a story of courage and hope and the fierce determination to protect what mattered most. And it was a story with a happy ending, the kind Olivia had stopped believing in somewhere along the way but had found anyway. Years later, when Samuel married a girl from town and started his own family, Olivia stood beside Zachary and watched their son dance with his bride. She thought about how different his life had turned out from what it might have been. Instead of growing up under Thomas Garrett's cruelty, he'd been raised with love and become a good man because of it. "We did all right," Zachary murmured, echoing her thoughts. "We did more than all right," Olivia said. "We gave him a life worth living." When Matthew headed east for college, the first in their family to do so, Olivia and Zachary stood on the train platform and waved until he disappeared from view. Their other children were growing too, becoming their own people, preparing to make their own ways in the world. "The house is going to be quieter soon," Zachary said. "But not empty," Olivia replied. "Never empty. We'll have grandchildren visiting before we know it." And they did. Samuel's children, a boy and twin girls, filled the house with noise and joy. Matthew came home with a wife and eventually children of their own. Margaret married a rancher and settled nearby. The house that Zachary had built echoed with new generations, with the continuation of the family they'd fought so hard to protect. On a warm summer evening when they were both well into their 50s, Olivia and Zachary sat on the porch watching the sunset, just as they'd done countless times before. Their hair had gone gray, their faces lined with years of sun and laughter. But their love was as strong as ever, tempered by decades of standing together through everything life brought. "You remember that first night?" Olivia asked. "When I came to your stable asking for help?" "I remember thinking you were the bravest woman I'd ever met," Zachary said. "And the prettiest, even scared and desperate as you were. I remember thinking I had no reason to trust you, but somehow I did anyway." "Best decision you ever made," Zachary said with a smile. "Second best," Olivia corrected. "The best decision was saying yes when you asked me to marry you." He took her hand, his thumb running over the gold band he'd given her all those years ago. "I tell that story sometimes, about the woman who was hiding a child and how I told her secrets are safe with me. So are you both." "And how does the story end?" Olivia asked, even though she knew. "It ends with a family, with love, with a life that was worth every risk and every moment of fear." He looked at her, his eyes still warm with love after all these years. "It ends happily ever after, just like it should." Olivia leaned her head on his shoulder, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. Around them, their land stretched out, the ranch they'd built together through hard work and determination. Inside the house, she could hear the sounds of their grandchildren playing, their laughter bright and careless in the way only children's laughter could be. "Yes," she said softly, "it ends happily ever after, for all of us." And as the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Olivia thought about how a single act of kindness, a cowboy's promise to protect a desperate woman and a frightened child, had grown into all of this, into family and love and generations of happiness. The Wild West had been harsh and unforgiving, full of danger and uncertainty. But it had also given them this, a chance to choose their own fate, to build something lasting, to find love in the most unexpected places. Samuel, who was now himself a father and grandfather, came out to sit with them. He was 50 now, his hair graying at the temples, his face weathered from years of working the land. But when he smiled at Olivia and Zachary, he was still the little boy they'd saved, still the child they'd chosen to protect no matter the cost. "Beautiful evening," he said. "Every evening is beautiful when you're surrounded by family," Olivia replied. They sat together in comfortable silence, three people bound by love and sacrifice, and the choices made so long ago. The choices that had led them here, to this porch, to this moment of peace and contentment. As night fully fell and the stars emerged in all their glory, Olivia felt Zachary's arm around her shoulders, felt the warmth of her son beside her, heard the sounds of her growing family all around. And she knew, with absolute certainty, that every moment of fear had been worth it. Every mile run, every night spent looking over her shoulder, every risk taken, it had all led to this. To love that lasted, to family that endured, to happiness that was real and earned and treasured. The woman who had been hiding a child had found a cowboy who kept his word. The secrets had been safe with him. They both had been safe with him. And together, they'd built something that would last long after they were gone, a legacy of love and courage that would pass down through the generations. It was the ending Olivia had never dared to hope for, but the one she'd found anyway. And as Zachary pressed a kiss to her temple and Samuel squeezed her hand, she closed her eyes and smiled, content in the knowledge that their story had turned out exactly as it should. Happily ever after, indeed.